The massive crystal halls of Nexus Prime stretched as far as the eye could see. Millions of lights sparkled from the ceiling like stars, each one representing a different world in the galaxy. Today, like every cycle for the past 500 years, representatives from 12,000 different species gathered in this place. They came to talk about trade, to settle fights between planets, and to make decisions that affected billions of lives across the galaxy. Ambassador Zixathala walked through the crowded halls on her 6 legs. Her purple skin glowed softly in the artificial light as she made her way to the Centaurian section. Around her, beings of every shape and size moved with purpose. Some looked almost human, while others were so strange that even after centuries of galactic cooperation, they still surprised her. There were the crystalline builders, whose bodies were made of living rock that sang when they moved. The void swimmers floated in special tanks filled with the dark energy they needed to survive. The gas giants rolled along in their pressure suits, their jellyfish-like forms pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. And thousands more, each one different, each one special in their own way. But as Zixathala took her seat, she noticed something that had bothered her for 2 centuries. In Section 7, Row 43, Seat 891, there was an empty chair. It was a simple chair made of earthwood, with a small nameplate that read Terra, Sol System, Humanity. Next to it sat a translation device that had never been used and a small Earth flag that had faded over the years. The chair had been empty for 500 years. Elder Korath, the ancient being who led the assembly, called the meeting to order. His voice echoed through the vast space without any technology. His species had evolved beyond the need for machines long ago. Welcome, friends, to the 847th Galactic Assembly. We have much to discuss today. The first item was the Void Plague. This terrible disease was killing entire colonies on the outer edges of the galaxy. Ships that went to help disappeared without a trace. Scientists had no idea how to stop it. The plague ate through both organic and artificial materials, leaving nothing but empty space where planets used to be. We have lost 17 worlds this cycle, reported Dr. Vexnar, the Assembly's chief medical officer. His forearms moved frantically as he showed holographic images of the destruction. The plague moves faster than our ships. We cannot evacuate planets quickly enough, the representatives murmured among themselves. Some spoke in languages that sounded like music, others in clicks and whistles. The universal translators worked overtime to help everyone understand each other. What about the Iron Worlds? Asked someone from the back. They promised military support. The Iron Worlds are too busy fighting the Helix Confederacy, replied another voice. That war has been going on for 30 years with no end in sight. Zixathala listened to the familiar arguments. Every cycle they faced the same problems. Wars that lasted decades. Diseases they could not cure. Political fights that never ended. Sometimes she wondered if intelligent life was just destined to destroy itself. I call for a vote, she said, standing up. Her translator picked up her words and broadcast them in 12,000 languages. We should remove the human seat from this assembly. They have never attended a single meeting. They ignore our messages. They do not participate in galactic affairs. Why do we continue to save a place for beings who clearly do not want to be here? A wave of discussion swept through the assembly. This was not the first time someone had suggested removing Earth's seat. In fact, it happened almost every cycle now. But somehow, the motion always failed. Elder Vishati of the Andromedans slowly stood up. She was one of the oldest beings in the galaxy, having lived for over 3,000 years. When she spoke, everyone listened. Young Zixathala raises a question we have debated many times, Vashiti said in her ancient, crackling voice. But I remind you all of how humanity joined this assembly. Their application was the most thorough document we had ever received. They knew our laws better than most species who had been members for centuries. They understood our customs, our traditions, our ways of doing things. Vashati's old eyes seemed to look back through time. The humans showed us technology we had never seen. They spoke of peace and cooperation. They offered to share knowledge that could help every world in the galaxy. And then, she paused, spreading her thin arms wide. They simply stopped talking to us. Exactly my point, Zixathala said. They ignore us. They are probably extinct by now. No, said a quiet voice from the data analysis section. Keeper Tixum, a small being covered in sensory organs, rarely spoke during assembly meetings. The Sol System shows signs of advanced civilization. We detect energy signatures consistent with a thriving technological society. They are very much alive. This created even more discussion. If humans were alive and had advanced technology, why did they never respond to galactic communications? Why did they avoid all contact with other species? Perhaps they are afraid, suggested someone. Or maybe they think they are too good for us, said another. Could they be planning something dangerous? Worried a third voice. Elder Korath raised one massive hand for silence. We will vote on Ambassador Zixathala's motion. All in favor of removing Earth's seat from the assembly? Lights began to glow throughout the vast hall as representatives voted. Red lights meant yes, blue lights meant no. Zixathala watched as thousands of red lights appeared, but just as many blue lights glowed in response. The motion fails, announced Korath after counting the votes. Earth's seat remains. Zixathala sat down, frustrated but not surprised. This happened every time. For some reason, enough species wanted to keep believing that humanity would someday join them. As the assembly moved on to other business, Captain Relthar of the Galactic Survey Corps sat in the observer section, thinking about his next assignment. He was scheduled to do a routine check of several star systems, including Sol. Maybe this time he would finally get some answers about the mysterious humans. In his long career exploring the galaxy, Relthar had seen many strange things. Planets made entirely of crystal that sang in harmony, gas clouds that were actually single living beings, ancient machines left behind by civilizations that had disappeared millions of years ago. But nothing puzzled him more than humanity. They had burst onto the galactic stage 5 centuries ago with impressive technology and peaceful intentions. They had followed every rule, filled out every form, and passed every test required for assembly membership. Then they had simply vanished from galactic politics while continuing to exist in their home system. Relthar made a decision. When he visited the Sol system, he would try harder than previous survey teams to make contact. Maybe the humans were just shy. Maybe they needed a personal invitation. Maybe they had been waiting for someone to visit them instead of just sending messages through space. As the assembly continued its debates about trade routes and territorial disputes, none of them knew that their questions about humanity were about to be answered in ways they never expected. In the darkness between stars, ancient machines were stirring. Sensors that had watched and waited for centuries were finally detecting the approach of curious visitors. The humans had indeed been silent for 500 years. But they had not been idle. They had been watching, learning, and preparing. Soon the galaxy would discover that sometimes the quietest voices have the most important things to say. Captain Relthar guided his ship, the Starseeker, toward the edge of the Sol system. The journey from Nexus Prime had taken 3 weeks, even with the fastest jump drives the Galactic Survey Corps could provide. Now, as the familiar yellow star grew larger on his view screen, he felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The Sol system looked peaceful from a distance. 9 planets orbited the star in predictable patterns, just as they had for billions of years. Relthar's instruments showed the normal readings he expected: rocky inner planets, gas giants in the outer system, countless asteroids and comets drifting through space. Computer, scan for artificial structures, he said to his ship's AI. Scanning, the computer replied in its calm, mechanical voice. Warning, multiple unknown objects detected. Relthar frowned. Previous survey missions had detected some human technology, but nothing unusual. Show me. The main screen lit up with a 3-dimensional map of the Sol system. At first, everything looked normal. Then the computer began marking the unknown objects with red dots. 1 dot appeared, then 10, then 100. Soon there were so many red dots that they almost covered the entire map. Computer, how many objects are you detecting? Scanning continues. Current count 47,612 artificial structures. Number increasing as scan resolution improves. Relthar stared at the screen in shock. 47,000 structures? That was impossible. The largest spacefaring civilizations in the galaxy had maybe a few hundred ships and stations in their home systems. What kind of structures are these? Unknown. They appear to be geometric constructs of varying sizes. The largest measures approximately 2,000 kilometers in diameter. They are positioned in stable orbits around all major celestial bodies. 2,000 kilometers? That was the size of a small moon. Relthar had never heard of any species building structures that large. And they were orbiting everything. The sun, all the planets, even the larger asteroids. As the Starseeker moved deeper into the system, Relthar got his first visual of one of the structures. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The object was perfectly geometric, like a crystal that had been carved by master artists. Its surface was dark but seemed to shimmer with internal light. It rotated slowly as it orbited Mars, and Relthar could see smaller structures attached to its surface like barnacles on a ship's hull. "Captain," his computer said suddenly, "we are receiving a transmission." "From where?" "From the structure you are observing." Relthar's hands trembled as he reached for the communication controls. This was it. After 500 years of silence, humanity was finally going to speak to the galaxy. "Put it through," he said. The voice that came through the speakers was calm and pleasant, speaking perfect Galactic standard with just a hint of an accent that Relthar had never heard before. "Greetings, Captain Relthar of the Galactic Survey Corps vessel Starseeker. Welcome to the Sol system. I am Watchkeeper 4479. Please state your intentions and the nature of your visit." Relthar was amazed. Not only were the humans responding, but they knew his name, his ship's name, and his organization. They had been watching him since he entered the system. "This is Captain Relthar," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I am conducting a routine survey mission on behalf of the Galactic Assembly. I was hoping to establish contact with human representatives." "Understood. Your mission has been logged and approved. You may approach Watchkeeper 4479 for a more detailed discussion if you wish. Docking Bay 7 is available for your use." A docking bay? The structure had docking bays. Relthar realized that this was not just a monitoring station. It was a massive facility capable of hosting visitors. As his ship moved closer to the structure, Relthar could see just how enormous it really was. The docking bay alone was large enough to hold a dozen ships the size of the Starseeker. The walls were smooth and metallic, with lines of soft light that guided his ship to the correct landing position. When the docking process was complete, Relthar put on his environmental suit and walked to the airlock. He had no idea what to expect. Would he finally meet a human face-to-face? Were they even still biological? Or had they somehow evolved beyond physical form? The airlock opened to reveal a corridor that looked almost normal. The walls were made of some kind of white material that gave off its own gentle light. The floor had a slight texture that provided good grip for beings with various types of feet. Even the air felt comfortable when Relthar tested it with his suit's sensors. "Welcome aboard Watchkeeper 4479, said the same voice he had heard on his ship. "Please follow the blue lights to Conference Room 1. Relthar followed a trail of soft blue lights through several corridors. He passed rooms with transparent walls that showed incredible technology. Massive computer systems, laboratories filled with equipment he did not recognize, and what looked like manufacturing facilities that could build almost anything. Conference Room 1 was simple but comfortable. It had a table that could adjust its height for different species, chairs that could change shape to fit any body type, and walls that displayed beautiful images of Earth. Blue oceans, green forests, white clouds, and cities that sparkled like jewels. "Please be seated," the voice said. "I will materialize a holographic avatar for our conversation." The air in front of Relthar shimmered, and suddenly a human appeared. It was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and gray hair. She wore simple clothes and had a gentle smile that made Relthar feel welcome. "I am Watchkeeper 4479, she said. "Though you may call me Sarah if you prefer. I am an artificial intelligence created by humanity to monitor this facility and interact with visitors." "You are not human?" Relthar asked. "I am human in thought and personality, but not in body," Sarah explained. "My consciousness is based on the memories and experiences of a real human named Sarah Chen, who died 300 years ago. She volunteered to have her mind preserved so that she could continue to help humanity's mission." "What mission?" Sarah's expression became more serious. "The mission to watch, learn, and protect. Humanity decided long ago that the galaxy was not ready for our direct participation, but we have never stopped caring about the welfare of all species." "I do not understand." "Your people applied to join the Galactic Assembly. You were accepted. Then you disappeared." "We did not disappear, Captain. We simply chose a different path." "May I show you something?" The walls of the conference room changed to display a massive star map of the galaxy. Thousands of small lights blinked on the map, each one representing a different location. "These lights represent the locations of Watchkeeper stations throughout the galaxy," Sarah explained. "We have been observing galactic civilization for 5 centuries. We have recorded every war, Every peace treaty, every technological advancement, every disaster. We have learned from your successes and your mistakes. Relthar stared at the map. There were watchkeeper stations everywhere, near every major trade route, every political border, every dangerous region of space. Humanity had not withdrawn from galactic affairs. They had embedded themselves so deeply in the galaxy that they could see everything. Why? He asked him. Why watch instead of participate? Sarah's holographic form walked to the star map and pointed to several flashing red areas. Because participation often means taking sides. It means making enemies. It means being forced to choose between helping one species or another. By remaining neutral observers, we can help everyone without becoming entangled in the politics that have torn the galaxy apart for millennia. But you could have helped us solve so many problems. Who says we have not? Sarah smiled mysteriously. Tell me, Captain, what is the current crisis facing the Galactic Assembly? The Void Plague. It is destroying worlds faster than we can evacuate them. Sarah nodded. And have you checked your ship's database for any anonymous scientific papers about dimensional parasites published in the last 50 years? Relthar was confused. Dimensional parasites? That is what you call the Void Plague. The cure was published anonymously in 17 different scientific journals across the galaxy over the past 50 years. The research was attributed to various fictional scientists, but it all came from watchkeeper stations. Relthar felt his world turning upside down. You have a cure for the Void Plague? We have had a cure for 300 years. We predicted the plague's emergence and developed countermeasures before it ever appeared. The information is freely available to anyone who takes the time to look for it. Why did you not give it directly to the Assembly? Sarah's expression became sad. Because the Assembly has a habit of ignoring advice that comes from sources they do not control. Anonymous scientific papers get studied and verified. Official communications from unknown species get buried in political committees. She waved her hand, and the star map changed to show the war between the Helix Confederacy and the Iron Worlds. We published detailed peace proposals for this conflict 200 years ago. 3 different species have tried to implement our suggestions, but political pride prevents both sides from accepting help. Relthar was beginning to understand the terrible irony of the situation. While the galaxy struggled with problems that seemed impossible to solve, humanity had been quietly offering solutions that no one bothered to use. How many problems have you solved? He asked. We prefer to think of it. Captain Relthar spent the next several hours learning about humanity's hidden presence in the galaxy. Sarah showed him through different sections of Watchkeeper 4479, each one more impressive than the last. There were vast libraries containing the complete history of every known species. There were laboratories where human scientists worked alongside advanced artificial intelligences to solve problems that had puzzled the galaxy for centuries. In one room, Relthar saw something that made his heart stop. It was a perfect replica of the Galactic Assembly Chamber, complete with tiny figures representing every species, but this version was different. In Section 7, Row 43, Seat 891, there was a small human figure sitting in the chair that had been empty for 500 years. We attend every assembly meeting, Sarah explained when she saw his shocked expression. Not physically, but we monitor every word spoken, every vote taken, every decision made. We have representatives in that chamber. You just cannot see them. Invisible observers? Quantum-phased monitoring devices. They exist in the same space as the assembly chamber, but shifted slightly out of normal reality. Completely undetectable to any known sensor technology. Relthar looked at the tiny human figure in the replica chamber. So you have been participating all along. We listen, we learn, and we offer advice when it might be helpful. But we do not vote or make formal statements. We learned early that direct involvement in galactic politics tends to make problems worse, not better. Sarah led him to another room that contained the most advanced computer system he had ever seen. Streams of data flowed through transparent tubes like liquid light. Holographic displays showed real-time information from across the galaxy. Ship movements, communication intercepts, energy readings from millions of worlds. This is where we monitor everything, Sarah said. Every Watchkeeper station feeds information back to facilities like this one. We know about problems before the species involved even realize they exist. She gestured to one of the displays, which showed a detailed map of the Orion sector. Several star systems were highlighted in yellow, with streams of data flowing from each one. For example, The star HD 164595 in the Orion sector will go supernova in 14 months, 23 days and approximately 6 hours. The explosion will destroy 7 inhabited planets and render 12 others uninhabitable. Approximately 47 billion lives are at risk. Relthar stared at the display in horror. 47 billion? We have to warn the Assembly immediately. We published a paper about stellar instability in that region 3 years ago, Sarah replied calmly. It was submitted to the Astrophysical Journal under the name Dr. K. Vextari, a fictional scientist from the Rigel system. The paper included specific warnings about HD 164595 and detailed evacuation plans for all threatened worlds. Was the paper accepted? Yes, it was even peer-reviewed by some of the galaxy's top astrophysicists. They confirmed our calculations and agreed that the threat was real. Then why has nothing been done? Sarah pulled up another display showing political communications from the Orion sector. The local governments received the scientific report, but they decided it was too expensive to evacuate 47 billion people based on a prediction. They voted to conduct their own study, which will take 5 years to complete. Relthar felt sick. 5 years? But the star will explode in 14 months. Politicians often prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths, Sarah said sadly. We have seen this pattern repeat thousands of times across the galaxy. Species receive warnings about disasters, then choose to ignore them because acting on the warnings would be difficult or expensive. She waved her hand, and the display changed to show a long list of warnings. Each entry had a date, a threat description, and a status update. Most of them were marked with red text that said ignored or dismissed. Warning 23. The void plague emergence predicted 312 years ago. Status ignored until plague began spreading. Cure still not implemented. Warning 156. War between Helix Confederacy and Iron Worlds predicted 174 years ago. Status peace proposal rejected by both sides. Conflict ongoing. Warning 298. Economic collapse of the Centaurian trade network predicted 89 years ago. Status. Warning dismissed as fear-mongering. Collapse occurred exactly as predicted. Warning 847. HD 164595 supernova predicted 3 years ago. Status evacuation plan rejected. 47 billion lives still at risk. The list went on and on. Hundreds of warnings about wars, disasters, plagues, economic problems, and technological dangers. Most of them had been ignored, and many of the predicted disasters had come to pass exactly as humanity had warned. How do you know these things will happen? Relthar asked. Pattern recognition, Sarah explained. We have observed galactic civilization for 5 centuries. We have seen the same mistakes repeated over and over again. Species make war for the same reasons. They ignore environmental problems until those problems become catastrophic. They develop dangerous technologies without considering the consequences. She pulled up a complex chart showing historical patterns. For example, we have identified 17 different scenarios that lead to interstellar war. When we see the early warning signs of any of these scenarios, we can predict with 97% accuracy whether conflict will occur and how devastating it will be. But if you can predict these things, why do you not stop them? Because stopping them often requires species to admit they are wrong, Sarah said, and that is something most species find very difficult to do. She showed him recordings of various attempts to provide warnings. In one case, humanity had sent an anonymous message to a planet warning them that their industrial practices would cause a climate disaster within 50 years. The planet's government had declared the message to be enemy propaganda and increased their industrial output out of spite. The climate disaster happened exactly when predicted, killing billions. In another case, humanity had provided detailed technical specifications for a safety system that would prevent Starship reactors from exploding. The specifications were given freely to all species. Most governments had declared the safety system unnecessary and expensive. Over the following decades, hundreds of ships had been destroyed by reactor explosions that the safety system would have prevented. The galaxy's greatest enemy is not any outside threat, Sarah said. It is pride. The pride that prevents species from accepting help. The pride that makes them repeat ancient mistakes. The pride that values being right more than being alive. Relthar thought about his own species, the Vorthon. They had fallen into 3 civil wars in the past century, each one triggered by the same basic disagreement about resource allocation. Each time, outside observers had offered mediation and compromise solutions. Each time, both sides had refused help because accepting it would mean admitting they might be wrong. "So you just watch?" he asked. "You let billions die because they are too proud to listen?" Sarah's expression became pained. "We tried direct intervention for the first 50 years after we joined the Galactic community. Do you know what happened?" She showed him historical records from that period. Humanity had sent ambassadors to negotiate peace treaties. They had shared advanced technology to solve resource shortages. They had provided medical aid during plagues and engineering support after natural disasters. "At first it worked well," Sarah continued. "We helped end several wars and saved millions of lives. But then problems began to appear. Species that we helped began to depend on our assistance instead of developing their own solutions. Other species became jealous of our technology and started wars to steal it. Governments began to blame us when our solutions did not work perfectly. The records showed the gradual deterioration of humanity's relationships with other species. Allies became enemies, friends became rivals. The very act of helping had created new problems that were often worse than the original ones. The final straw came during the Proxima crisis 230 years ago," Sarah said. "We provided military assistance to help the Proxima colonies defend against raiders. Our intervention was successful, but it created a power imbalance that led to a much larger war involving 37 different species. Billions died in a conflict that we had inadvertently caused by trying to help." She paused, her holographic form flickering slightly with what might have been emotion. "That was when we realized that the road to hell truly is paved with good intentions. We decided that the galaxy needed to grow up on its own, but we would watch carefully and offer quiet help to those wise enough to ask for it." "Has anyone ever asked?" Sarah smiled for the first time in hours. "A few. The Andromedans have quietly implemented 47 of our suggestions over the past century. They never admit where the ideas came from, but they study our anonymous publications carefully and adapt our solutions to their needs. Their society has become one of the most stable and prosperous in the galaxy as a result. And the others? They continue to make the same mistakes their ancestors made 1,000 years ago. But we keep hoping that someday wisdom will overcome pride. Until then, we watch, we learn, and we prepare for the day when the galaxy might finally be ready to grow beyond its childhood." Relthar looked around the vast chamber filled with humanities. Captain Relthar spent 3 days aboard Watchkeeper 4479, learning about humanity's secret gift to the galaxy. Sarah gave him access to a special database that contained all 1,000 warnings that humans had tried to share over the centuries. Each warning was like looking into a crystal ball that showed the future with terrifying accuracy. Warning number 1 had been published 500 years ago in a scientific journal on Proxima Centauri. It predicted that the planet's atmospheric processors would fail within 50 years if they were not properly maintained. The warning included detailed maintenance schedules and replacement part specifications. The warning was ignored, and the atmospheric processors failed exactly 51 years later, forcing the evacuation of 12 million colonists. Warning number 67 described how the mining operations on Kepler 442b would destabilize the planet's crust, causing massive earthquakes that would destroy the colony cities. The warning was published as an anonymous geological survey 200 years ago. Mining companies dismissed it as environmental propaganda. The earthquakes began exactly when predicted, and 3 billion people died when the colony cities collapsed. Warning number 134 predicted the rise of the void plague by analyzing patterns in quantum dimensional tiers that appeared near black holes. The warning was written as a theoretical physics paper and published in 12 different scientific journals. It described how microscopic organisms from parallel dimensions would eventually break through into normal space and begin consuming matter at the quantum level. The paper included detailed instructions for creating quantum barriers that would prevent the plague from spreading. The void plague could have been stopped before it ever started, Sarah explained as they reviewed the warning. We even provided the technology to build quantum barrier generators. The plans were freely available in 17 different languages. Why did no one build them? Relthar asked. Because the technology required cooperation between 37 different species. Each species would need to contribute specific materials and expertise, but none of them wanted to work together on a project to stop a threat that might never happen. Sarah showed him video recordings of various planetary governments discussing the quantum barrier project. The meetings always followed the same pattern. Scientists would present the evidence and explain the threat. Politicians would ask about the cost and timeline. When they learned that the project would take 50 years and require working with rival species, they would vote to postpone the decision until the threat became more immediate. By the time the void plague actually appeared, it was too late to build the barriers, Sarah continued. The plague spread faster than the barriers could be constructed. Now entire sectors of the galaxy are quarantined zones where nothing can survive. Relthar studied the plague's current spread pattern on a galactic map. The infected zones looked like cancer eating away at the galaxy's outer rim. How many worlds have been lost? 437 planets are completely gone. Another 812 are partially infected. At the current rate of spread, the plague will reach the core worlds within 200 years. Unless someone implements the cure you mentioned. Yes. Warning number 23 contains complete instructions for building quantum sterilization devices that can destroy the plague organisms. The technology is actually quite simple once you understand the principles involved. A single sterilization device can clear the plague from an entire star system in 6 months. Sarah pulled up the technical specifications for the sterilization devices. The plans were incredibly detailed, with step-by-step construction instructions and lists of required materials. Everything needed to build the devices was readily available in the galaxy. How long would it take to clear all the infected zones? Relthar asked. With proper coordination, the entire plague could be eliminated in 10 years. But that would require building approximately 2,000 sterilization devices and deploying them systematically across all infected regions. Why has this not been done? Sarah's expression became bitter. Politics. The species whose worlds are not yet infected do not want to spend resources helping the species whose worlds are already lost. The infected species are too busy evacuating their populations to build the devices themselves, and everyone argues about who should control the sterilization technology once the plague is gone. She showed him recordings of assembly debates about the void plague. Representatives spent more time arguing about territorial claims in cleared regions than they did discussing how to actually clear those regions. Some species even suggested that the plague might be beneficial because it would eliminate their rivals and leave more resources for the survivors. Greed and short-sighted thinking, Relthar muttered. They would rather let the plague destroy everything than work together to stop it. That is why we stopped offering direct help, Sarah said. No matter how simple we make the solutions, no matter how clearly we explain the benefits, galactic politics always gets in the way. She moved on to warning number 156, which dealt with the ongoing war between the Helix Confederacy and the Iron Worlds. The warning had been published as a series of anonymous diplomatic papers that analyzed the historical causes of the conflict and offered detailed peace proposals. This war has killed 4 billion people over the past 30 years, Sarah explained. It started because of a misunderstanding about mining rights in the Vega system. Both sides claimed ownership of the same asteroid field based on different interpretations of an ancient treaty. The warning papers had included a simple solution: divide the asteroid field equally between both sides and establish a joint mining operation. That would benefit everyone. The papers even provided detailed economic projections showing how cooperation would make both sides far richer than continued warfare. Did anyone try to implement the peace plan? Relthar asked. 3 different species offered to mediate using our proposals, Sarah replied. The Helix Confederacy rejected mediation because they did not want to give up their territorial claims. The Iron Worlds rejected it because they did not want to appear weak. Both sides preferred to keep fighting rather than admit they might be wrong about anything. Warning. Number 203 described how the Centaurian trade network would collapse due to an over-reliance on artificial currency manipulation. The warning was published as an economic analysis paper that showed exactly how the manipulation would eventually spiral out of control. The Centaurians built their entire economy on a complex system of artificial currency exchanges, Sarah explained. They created virtual money that had no real backing, then used that money to buy real goods from other species. It worked for a while, but it was essentially a massive pyramid scheme that had to collapse eventually. The warning paper had included recommendations for economic reforms that would have prevented the collapse. The Centaurian government had received the paper and even commissioned their own economist to verify the analysis. When their economists confirmed that the predictions were accurate, the government classified the report as a state secret and continued their manipulative practices. They knew their economy would collapse, but they kept doing it anyway. Relthar was amazed by the stupidity. The people in charge were making enormous profits from the manipulation, Sarah said. They planned to cash out their artificial wealth before the collapse happened, leaving everyone else to suffer the consequences. Classic short-term thinking that prioritizes individual gain over long-term stability. Warning after warning told the same story. Humanity had foreseen disasters and provided solutions. The solutions were ignored for political reasons, economic reasons, or simple pride. The disasters happened exactly as predicted, killing billions and destroying entire civilizations. But there were also success stories. Warning number 89 had helped the Rigel colonies develop new agricultural techniques that prevented famine during a climate shift. Warning number 321 had provided the Andromedans with early detection methods for a genetic disease that could have wiped out their species. Warning number 445 had given the Vega shipyard safety protocols that prevented industrial accidents. The difference, Sarah noted, is that these species were willing to implement anonymous suggestions without needing to know where they came from. They cared more about solving problems than about getting credit for the solutions. Relthar spent hours reviewing the database, marveling at the scope of humanity's knowledge and the tragedy of how little of it had been used. Every warning was like a gift that had been offered freely, and then thrown away by recipients who were too proud or too stupid to accept help. What about warning number 847? He asked, remembering Sarah's mention of the approaching supernova. The star that will explode in 14 months. Sarah's expression became grave. That is our most urgent current warning. 47 billion lives hang in the balance. We have provided detailed evacuation plans that could save everyone if implemented immediately. But the local governments continue to delay, hoping their own studies will prove us wrong. She showed him the evacuation plans. They were masterpieces of logistics and organization. Humanity had calculated exactly how many ships would be needed, what supplies should be prioritized, and where the evacuated populations could be relocated. They had even identified Fun Captain Relthar returned to Nexus Prime with a data crystal containing proof of everything he had learned. The crystal held recordings of his conversations with Sarah, copies of hundreds of warning papers that humanity had published, and most importantly, the complete technical specifications for devices that could stop the Void Plague. When he requested an emergency session of the Galactic Assembly, Elder Korath granted it immediately. Word spread quickly through the massive station that the Survey Corps had finally made contact with humanity. Representatives from 12,000 species gathered in the crystal halls, all wondering what secrets the mysterious humans had finally decided to reveal. Relthar stood at the central podium, looking out at the sea of alien faces. Some looked eager, others skeptical, and many appeared annoyed at being called away from their normal business. In Section 7, Row 43, Seat 891, the human chair remained empty as always. Fellow beings, Relthar began, I have returned from the Sol system with information that will change how we view humanity's relationship with the galactic community. The humans have not been absent from our affairs. They have been watching us more closely than we ever imagined. He activated the holographic display system and showed them images of the Watchkeeper stations. Thousands of geometric structures appeared in the air above the assembly, each one a monument to humanity's patient observation of galactic civilization. A wave of shocked murmurs swept through the hall. Ambassador Zixthala was the first to speak. Captain Relthar, are you telling us that humans have been spying on the galaxy for 5 centuries? Not spying, Relthar replied. Watching, learning, and offering help in the only way they believed would be effective. He began to play Sarah's recordings, starting with her explanation of why humanity had chosen observation over participation. Many representatives became angry when they learned that humans had been secretly monitoring assembly meetings. Others were fascinated by the advanced technology that made such monitoring possible. But when Relthar began to reveal the 1,000 warnings, the mood in the assembly changed completely. He started with warning number 23, the Void Plague cure. As the technical specifications appeared on the holographic display, Dr. Vexnar, the Assembly's chief medical officer, began to examine them carefully. His forearms moved frantically as he cross-referenced the data with his own research. "These quantum sterilization devices," Dr. Vexnar said, his voice filled with amazement. "The theoretical foundation is brilliant. We have been approaching the plague all wrong. We tried to fight it with conventional weapons when we should have been attacking its quantum signature." "How long would it take to build these devices?" asked Elder Korath. "With proper resources and cooperation, we could have the first prototype ready in 3 months. Mass production could begin within a year." Excited discussion filled the assembly hall. For the first time in decades, they had a real solution to the void plague. But as Relthar continued his presentation, the excitement began to mix with embarrassment and anger. Warning number 67 showed detailed predictions of the Kepler 442b mining disaster. The geological survey that humanity had published was sitting in the Assembly's archives. Marked as reviewed but not actionable, 3 billion people had died because no one had bothered to verify the warning number 134 contained the complete plans for quantum barriers that could have prevented the void plague entirely. The plans had been submitted to 37 different governments over the past century. Each government had filed the plans away, assuming that someone else would take responsibility for building the barriers. As warning after warning was revealed, a pattern became clear. Humanity had foreseen almost every major disaster that had befallen the galaxy in the past 5 centuries. They had provided solutions that could have prevented billions of deaths and saved thousands of worlds, and the galactic community had ignored almost all of them. Representative Kixtal of the Iron World stood up angrily. If the humans had this knowledge, why did they not share it directly? Why hide behind anonymous publications and fictional authors? Relthar played Sarah's explanation of humanity's early attempts at direct intervention. The recordings showed how human help had initially been welcomed, then resented, and finally rejected. The Proxima crisis had demonstrated that direct involvement often made problems worse instead of better. The humans learned that pride prevents species from accepting help, Relthar explained. When advice comes from an official source, it becomes a political issue. When it comes from anonymous research, it can be evaluated on its own merits. But anonymous warnings can be ignored, protested Ambassador Vexnari of the Helix Confederacy. And they were, Relthar replied bluntly. Almost all of them. He showed them warning number 156, the detailed peace proposal for ending the war between the Helix Confederacy and the Iron Worlds. Both sides had received copies of the proposal years ago. Both sides had rejected it without serious consideration. Representative Kixtal and Ambassador Vexnari stared at each other across the assembly hall. The peace proposal on the holographic display offered everything both sides claimed to want. Fair division of disputed territories, economic benefits for everyone, and an end to the killing that had consumed a generation. "Why did you never mention this proposal to us?" Kixtal demanded of Vexnari. "Why did you never mention it to us?" Vexnari shot back. "Because," Elder Vashati said quietly, "you both dismissed it as enemy propaganda. Neither side wanted to admit that an outside observer might understand your conflict better than you did." The uncomfortable truth settled over the assembly like a heavy blanket. For centuries, they had received warnings and solutions from humanity. Most had been ignored not because they were wrong, but because accepting them would require admitting that someone else was smarter, more careful or more far-sighted than they were. Relthar saved the worst revelation for last. He displayed warning number 847, the prediction of the HD 164595 supernova that would occur in just over 13 months. The evacuation plans that humanity had provided were comprehensive and detailed. They could save 47 billion lives if implemented immediately. 13 months, he said, letting the time frame sink in. 47 billion people will die unless we act now. The assembly erupted in panicked discussion. Representatives began calling their home governments, demanding to know why the scientific warnings about HD 164595 had been ignored. Emergency committees were formed to review evacuation procedures. Ships were dispatched to begin preliminary rescue operations. But even in the face of such immediate crisis, politics intruded. The governments of worlds that would benefit from accepting evacuees demanded payment for providing temporary homes. Species with large cargo fleets wanted exclusive trading rights in exchange for providing transportation. Military forces argued about who would have authority in the evacuation zones. Ambassador Zixthala watched the chaos with growing frustration. Finally, she stood and called for order. "We are doing it again," she shouted. "We are letting politics interfere with saving lives." The assembly fell silent. Zixathala's purple skin had turned almost black with anger. "The humans have given us the gift of knowledge, and we respond by arguing about who should profit from using it. They offer us solutions to our greatest problems, and we debate whether accepting those solutions will make us look weak." She pointed to the empty human chair. "That seat has been vacant for 500 years, but the humans have been more present in our affairs than any of us. They have tried to help us become better than we are, and we have failed them, just as we have failed ourselves." Elder Korath stood slowly, his ancient form commanding immediate attention. "Ambassador Zixthala speaks wisdom. We face a choice that will define the future of galactic civilization. We can continue as we have, letting pride and politics prevent us from accepting help when it is offered. Or we can humble ourselves and learn from the species that has watched us with such patience." He gestured to the display showing humanity's 1,000 warnings. These warnings represent 5 centuries of caring. Humanity could have withdrawn completely after we rejected their direct offers of help. Instead, they continued to watch over us, continued to offer solutions, continued to hope that we would eventually grow wise enough to listen. "What do you propose?" asked Dr. Vexnar. "I propose that we finally give humanity the respect they have earned," Korath replied. "I propose that we officially request their return to active participation in galactic affairs. Not as junior partners or advisors, but as the wise elders they have proven themselves to be." The proposal sparked intense debate. Some species worried that humanity's advanced knowledge would give them unfair advantages in trade and politics. Others feared that humans would try to dominate the galaxy through their superior understanding of galactic patterns. A few even suggested that humanity's long isolation had made them alien and untrustworthy. But the approaching supernova gave urgency to the discussion. 47 billion lives hung in the balance, and humanity had provided the only realistic plan for saving them. As reports came in from the HD 164595 system, confirming that the star was indeed